Hey there, this is Yann Ilunga, host of the Podcast Lab and founder of the Podcast Success Academy, and you're listening to the one and only Chasing Dreams with Amy J.
Welcome to Chasing Dreams podcast with Amy J. Amy believes that realizing a life without regrets is achieved by taking chances, chasing your dreams, making moves, and overcoming your doubts. The Chasing Dreams podcast will help you overcome life's obstacles, believe in your potential, and inspire you to face your fears. And now here's the woman who is passionately pursuing her dreams, Amy J.
Hey Dream Chasers, this is Amy J, and thank you so much for tuning in to episode 74 of Chasing Dreams. Today's guest is a podcaster and strategist who helps entrepreneurs and marketers expose and leverage podcasts to build authority, generate more leads, and increase more sales. He is Yann Ilunga, and he's the founder of the Podcast Success Academy and the host of, count them, 5 podcasts. His latest, The Podcaster Lab, discusses podcasting with a brand new format and an exclusive look at strategies and experiments for audience growth, marketing, and monetization. So with that kind of a pedigree, I'm pretty sure he can put together an academy. So he's taken some time to come on the show and talk about his dream chase. So please welcome Yann. Hey, man, how are you?
Amy, Happy New Year. How's it going?
It is fantastic. You are the first episode guest for the new year, and I'm thrilled. I know, right? And it's fantastic because you are kicking it off in a big way this year.
Yes, ma'am. I'm really working hard for making 2017 a fantastic year at 360 degrees.
Yes. So Yann is my first international podcast guest. So congratulations and thank you for being that.
Thank you, Amy. I feel honored. I feel so much pressure.
You're setting the stage. Yes, absolutely. But Yann, let's talk a moment about the things you're doing this year, but what led to it first. You have a background in communications, journalism?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I did both my master's and bachelor degree. I studied communication and journalism. I worked as a journalist. I worked in the communication space for some time. So that's really what my background is.
Now, when you went to school in college, there's a lot of decisions people have to make. Do I write for a magazine? Do I write for a blog or something like that? Did those kinds of thoughts come into your head during then? Did you struggle with trying to decide what to do after college?
Well, I have to say that I had a friend who knew exactly what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to become a sports columnist or something like that. So back when we were still doing our bachelor's, he was lucky because since he knew exactly what he wanted to do, he knew when it was time to choose certain courses, for example, he was able to say, okay, this is going to be useless for what I want to do, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to focus on these ones. I wasn't in that position. I had more of an open mind. I was like, well, I know I'm interested in communication. I'm interested in writing. I like to talk to people. So I know I'm going to be working in this space, but I didn't know exactly what that was going to be. So, there were certain things that then led to it. And to some extent, certain experiences happened almost by accident, really.
And so those experiences, do you call them losses in a sense if you didn't enjoy it, or was it a positive experience in a way for you? Because when you have an open mind like that, you're not necessarily looking for any one thing. So some of your experiences probably were hits and some were losses. Do you have any regrets?
No, well, I don't. I mean, I think I'm a person who tries not to cry too much about the past and say, had I done this thing, now things would be different, because I can't do anything about it. And sure, there are certain things that I'm like, had I taken a different route back then, now things would have been different or things like that. But I think there is no point in kind of complaining about the past. But I had some experiences where, obviously, as I said, I had an idea. I knew that I wanted to work in communications. And then I started to see if it was possible to combine what I was studying with a passion of mine. So I'm a huge fan of music. I love live music. I'm literally a person who could wear headphones as soon as I wake up and fall asleep to music. I love listening to music all the time. And then I thought to myself, hey, what if I would find a way to combine my passion and my academic background? So what if I was able to start working to some degree in the music industry? And I had the chance of being introduced by a friend of mine and start working at a jazz festival, an international music festival in Switzerland, where I worked for a few years. And because I spoke 4 languages back then, those skills allowed me to really do quite many different things. So I got to do radio interviews in English, translations, video interviews. I wrote articles for newspapers. And really that was kind of the springboard to what became what I do now to some extent.
And that's actually amazing. 4 languages? Real quick, what languages do you speak?
Yeah, so as people can tell, I have an accent. So my macaroni accent comes from the fact that I'm from the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland. So Italian is my mother tongue, and then I speak French and German, because in Switzerland we have 4 national languages. And then I speak English, as you can tell. And now the languages are actually 5, because in addition to those, I speak a little bit of Finnish, because I've been living in Finland for a few years. So yeah, English, French, German, Italian, and Finnish. And because of Italian, I can understand Spanish. I don't speak any Spanish, but I understand because it's very similar to Italian.
I had no idea that was true. Is that really true?
It is. Yeah. Italian and Spanish are very similar. I have some friends, even here, who maybe don't speak much Finnish, don't speak much English, but they speak Spanish, and I answer to them in a kind of macaroni, Spanish and English, and I understand most of what they say.
That's fantastic. So I don't think I've had a podcast guest who's spoken 5 languages. And
oh, wow.
I know. You're just hitting all sorts of new things for this year. Yann, when you decided to do music and the communications there, you kind of, you have 5 podcasts. How did you stumble from music industry communications to not just 1 podcast, but 5?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when I moved to Finland, I wanted to do my master's here, my master's degree. And then I was working for a newspaper. And basically, as I said, I'm a person who really enjoys music. And when I was studying for some exams, I was like, and that was a rare moment for me, because I usually have never enough of music. And I was like, I need a break from music, but I still would like to listen to something. So I just did a Google search, and I came across this thing called podcasts. I had no idea what they were, 0 ideas. So I started to listen to one of the first results on Google, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I started to listen to more and more. And then I was like, hey, wait a second. Anyways, starting my own thing to really be free 100% is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And podcasting, it's something that would really allow me to do many things. And I was like, the question is, from which angle do I want to enter the podcasting world? And then I said to myself, wait a second, because of those years working at the jazz festival back in Switzerland, I have many connections. What if I were to leverage those? So that's where my very first podcast, The Jazz Spotlight, which is a music business show, was born, and I got to interview artists and blah, blah, blah. And then having a music business podcast was great. However, the networking aspect of having a podcast or the relationship building aspect was limited for the fact that certain people that I was following in the entrepreneurial space and so forth, I wasn't able to invite them on my podcast because they were entrepreneurs, and I hosted a music business podcast.
Right, so that you don't really match there.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where my second podcast, the 360 Entrepreneur, that is the podcast people quote unquote know me for, was born. And that really allowed me to really connect with all the people that I really wanted to connect with in the entrepreneurial and digital marketing space. So that's kind of where I kind of made the switch from being a journalist and being about to graduate and thinking about I want to do my own thing. And then I jumped into podcasting. So first by accident, but then I started to see how much of a powerful medium podcasts are. And, now I breathe, eat, and sleep podcasting.
Yeah. Not only do you eat, breathe, sleep podcasting, you put together the first, and you're the founder of the Podcast Success Academy, which, Podcast Success Summit, actually.
Yeah, the summit. Yeah.
The summit, which is actually the first time I learned of you, because I had started podcasting and I came across your summit, and it's amazing. You put together a star-studded, action-packed, people-packed summit. How were you able to get all of them together?
Well, I can tell you, I got some white hair from that experience for sure, because it was great. I enjoyed it a lot, but I have to, I don't sugarcoat things. It was a lot of work. It was 80 speakers and it was 25 days, if I remember correctly, in a row. So it was a lot of work. And the summit, I decided to turn that one experience into an annual event, digital event at the moment. So there's definitely going to be a 2017 edition of the summit. I haven't announced anything yet, but definitely be on the lookout. But yeah, in terms of the how, leaving technology aside, what I did is I really, when I do an interview, many, and I'm interviewed often. I do interviews as well for different podcasts, and it makes me smile when I come across people who leverage an interview as something like, okay, I've interviewed Amy, now I can cross her off the list on to the next guest. What I personally do is I try to really be aware of the person I'm interviewing or that is interviewing me. And then I see if there is any way we can collaborate. So in my case, I think 40, I don't remember if it was something like 43. Anyways, over half of the speakers of the summit were people who I originally connected to through my podcast, were people who I interviewed. And because I'm a person who, whenever I can, I try to help people. So if I see somebody as a product launch coming up, something like that, I try to help with the promotion. Even if I may not be an affiliate, I share it on social or something like that. And by me being a helper first, a giver first, when it was my time to make the ask and ask them, hey, I'm thinking of putting together this digital conference and I'd love for you to be one of the speakers. People were like, yeah, absolutely. Tell me when and where, because I was trying to be a helper first. So while many podcasters or interviewers more specifically just focus on, okay, I'm going to interview this person and then I focus on the next and the next, I really try to see, I'm not saying that, yeah, you have to become best friend with everybody, but at the same time, I've seen that happen quite a few times, Amy, where something that started as an interview has led to many other collaborations, webinars, the academy, joint articles, guest posts, and these kind of things. And as I said a moment ago, for me, podcasting has been such an incredible medium for many reasons.
You've also expanded upon it. You stumbled upon podcasting, which I had no idea, apparently through a Google search, and then fell in love with it. And you've been able to not only sustain it, but become a leader in the area. And I don't know, some of you may have noticed my misspeak earlier where I said Podcast Success Academy instead of Summit. But that wasn't necessarily a misspeak because he's done that as well. That's his latest baby. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am in the podcasting space. So I also have, as you said in the intro, my latest podcast, the Podcast Lab, is a show that is all about podcasting. And I thought of discussing, because there already are podcasts about podcasting, but I thought I would do something different. So I kind of discuss podcasting there. I have a Facebook community, which I love, where we talk about podcasting. And I do consulting as well. I do one-on-one work, but I'm a person who really like to talk to people. And I really am a person who love helping others. And for me, there is nothing better than seeing somebody rock because of, a piece of advice I shared or whatever the case may be. So that's where I decided to launch my membership site, the Podcast Success Academy. So yeah, as you said, with the names, Podcast Success Summit, Podcast Success Academy, it's really easy to get confused. And basically with the academy, I discuss podcasting, I teach podcasting, but I don't do that with an vertical relationship where I'm, at the top and I tell you everything because I'm the best. Absolutely not. I provide an educational component, but then there is also a more of an horizontal approach where I basically take back the curtain on experiments I'm running. So that's where the idea lab comes from for the Podcaster Lab and for the Academy as well, where I work with people and I say, hey, these are some of the things I'm doing and I want to show you everything so you know what works and what doesn't work. So that's the Podcast Success Academy in a nutshell.
And the thing is, though, Yann, I just want to remind you, I know you're ahead of me in terms of time zone. There still is only 24 hours in the day. Just a reminder of that, because you have the Academy, you have 5 podcasts, you have your wonderful nature who is coaching and helping others and running a Facebook community. I mean, do you have time for yourself in doing all that? Or is that your labor of love that's, passion project that you're doing, that you're putting your all into?
No. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's what I do full time. So that's my work. But the advantage I have is that since you said it, I'm in Europe, I'm in Finland. So the advantage I have is that most of the work I do, so interviews, one-on-one coaching and things like that, are, I would say, is 95% with people in North America. And for me, that's a huge advantage because it means that basically I have a 7-hour difference with the Eastern Standard Time. So it means that for me, for example, when it's morning over here, I can do many other things because my clients and people I work with are sleeping. So I get to do other things as well. And obviously, I make sure to always carve out some time to do, things I enjoy, which aren't necessarily related to podcasts. And there is no doubt that it is a lot of work. And, it's important to really loving what one does. I always say that I love what I do so much that in theory, I could work even 24 hours a day because I really do enjoy what I do. But at the same time, I also know that it is important to have time for oneself to do things that aren't related to the work. And the way to go about this when one has kind of many different sub-projects, if we label them like that, is to really try and be organized so that one is as efficient as possible in taking care of whatever needs to be taken care of today, this week, this month, this quarter, and so forth.
And that's actually something maybe you can talk to, because having done so many different things, having so many sub projects, as you call them, how do you balance if someone has a dream, especially in this new year that they want to put together, and 2017 is the year they want to make it happen? Is there any advice you have for them in organizing things without losing themselves in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, it is great that we are at this time of the year because usually this is when people make the resolutions for the year and they say, okay, this year I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do that thing. So the timing couldn't have been any better. And we are on Chasing Dreams, so it makes sense. Well, one thing that I do that I personally have seen that works very well. And of course, it goes without saying that that is something that has worked very well for me, but I'm sure that can be very helpful for people, is that sometimes when we have dreams, we say, okay, I would love to do this specific thing. Let's say, for example, I would love to travel the world. So what we tend on doing is when we have something that, especially when it's a big dream, we set a goal that is a very big goal. And basically, in between where we are right now and that goal, there is a huge gap. And we feel that, yeah, we aren't making progress. So my advice is to, when having a goal, try to say, okay, this is what I want to do. I will actually, let's make another example that is easier to understand. Let's say I would love to be a keynote speaker at industry conferences. I've always liked to be on stage. I would love to be speaking at conferences all the time. Okay, great. Now the first question to do, or the first thing to do, is to reverse engineer and ask ourselves, what are the steps that are between where I am today and being a keynote speaker? So in this case, one is, okay, how are my communication skills? How are my speaking skills? How am I on stage? So there is that part. And then there is the looking for conferences part. Okay, so once I feel confident in my communication skills, I like being on stage, blah, blah. Where do I find conferences? And then the next step is, okay, now that I know how to find conferences, how do I actually find the first conferences so I get to taste what being a speaker means? Once I do a few of those conferences, it's like, okay, now how can I raise the profile and go after bigger conferences? If another analogy is thinking about sports or music, for example. When it comes to music, no band goes from zero to playing at the huge arena with thousands of people. Absolutely not. There are some steps that go into that. So by breaking down a big goal, a dream, into the sub goals, into the steps that need to be taken in order to achieve that goal, what we do is we have a blueprint that we could even have written down on a piece of paper or use. I'm a huge fan of a tool called Trello and its boards. It's really useful. So we have it there in black and white. In theory, we can look at it, but at the same time, it allows us to then say, okay, so these are the steps, and say, okay, for the next, let's say, 3 months, I'm going to focus on practicing speaking every day, or once a week, depending on how much time you have. Because if you have a full-time job and chasing your dream is something that at the moment you can do only 2 hours on Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4, no problem. Just dedicate those 2 hours every week to start and sharpen your speaking skills, for example. And then once you do that, you say, okay, now for the next couple of months, I'm going to do this other thing. And what that does, not only it provides you with a blueprint, it provides you with a clear path, clear step-by-step process to follow, but it also allows you every now and then to take a moment and look back and see where you are right now. So you are able to see where you were when you started and where you are right now. And the importance of looking back. So a moment ago, I said, yeah, I'm not a person who looks back and complains about, yeah, I should have done this, I should have done that. What I do, though, is I sometimes take a moment to celebrate wins. And it's not that, yeah, I always open a bottle of champagne. What I mean is that I take a moment to really be aware of some of the things I've achieved, for the fact that we thrive on motivation. Motivation is really what pushes us, especially through tough times. And I think oftentimes we have the problem of being so focused on the arrival, on that big goal, on the dream, that we forget about everything else. And then when we think we aren't making progress, we start to feel overwhelmed, we start to feel sad, in certain cases also depressed. But if we take a moment and really look at what we have done so far, and we become aware of, man, 2 months ago I was afraid to speak in front of 2 people. Now I've been able to speak in front of a group of 10 people for 2 times. That's fantastic. That's a step forward. And then after a few months, it would be, man, 5 months ago, I was afraid to look myself in the mirror with a microphone. Now I've spoken at 2 workshops here with 20 people each. So doing those kind of things really help, not only being organized, but also helps your mentality, your mindset, so that you're really motivated because you're aware that you are moving forward rather than feeling that, yeah, I'm swimming really hard, but I'm not moving anywhere.
That's actually really great advice, especially when you guys are starting off. You know, you can get overwhelmed very easily and kind of give up. And that's one thing we find a lot of people do is give up quickly. But
right. What
you're saying is, you know, take a moment to evaluate how far you've come. Right. And do you find that you did that as well as you were moving forward to not just the Success Academy, but the Success Summit on your podcasts?
It's something, Amy, it's something I still do, and I will never stop doing it. And I think if every person, regardless of where you are in your chase of the dream or in your entrepreneurial journey, this is something that is always gonna help you, because it's gonna really make you understand how much you have moved. And sometimes, as I was saying, we feel that, yeah, we aren't making any progress, but actually we do make progresses. And another piece of advice I would have is to stop comparing your chapter 2 with somebody else's chapter 20.
That's a great one.
Yeah, we tend to get stuck so much. And I'm not saying that one shouldn't have inspirations. It's important to have people that one looks up to. But what I mean is not to feel overwhelmed or sad or whatever because we compare ourselves with the people we follow. And I always follow 3 steps. And if it's okay with you, Amy, I can share them. That
Please.
Is something that goes, okay, great. So basically what I do is whenever I learn something, whether that's I read a book, I watch a webinar, I listen to a podcast like Chasing Dreams, I attend a conference, and I come across something that I'm like, oh, wow, this is something that I'm interested in, is a strategy I could apply, something like that. What I do is I try to keep in mind that it's not because Amy followed steps 1, 2, 3 and got this fantastic result. Doesn't mean that if I follow Amy's exact steps, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to get the same result, because there are many variables that come into play. The audience, the pre-existing audience, and all these kind of things. But sometimes we think that, yeah, if we get the exact blueprint as influencer A and we do the exact same things, we're going to get the exact same results. And that's not the case. So my advice is, and I came up with this term, and I call these the 3 T's. So whenever you want to learn something, do these 3 things. First is test. So when you hear somebody, okay, Amy did this, she got this great result, say to yourself, okay, now I'm interested in this strategy, but what I have to do, I have to test it for my own thing, for my own business, for my own side hustle, for my own podcast, for my own blog, for my own Instagram page, so that I see how that works for what I am doing. So that's the first T. The second T stands for track. So what is the way to know if something is working or not? Is to track. So keep track of analytics or stats, depending on what is it that you want to measure, so that you can see, did the strategy work? No, it didn't. Yes, it did. If it did, how much did it work? Very well. Okay. More than okay. So that then you can go to the third and final T, which is tweak, so that you can tweak the specific strategy or whatever, or you can move on. So always try to test, track, and tweak, my friends.
I love that. That's a great little mnemonic to help people with this new year. You guys, you should really Write that down. It'll be in the show notes as well. But, keep that in mind. Yann, you're just full of great advice today.
And, Amy, what I really like about that approach is that it can be applied to anything. It doesn't really matter what your dream is, what is it that you're trying to achieve. This 3 T's approach can be done. I'm a sports person, so even in sports, you can apply it as well. When it comes to the tracking, probably you aren't going to be, okay, I missed this many shots today, I made this many shots, but you're still going to be able to track what is your evolution. So for example, if, you're a basketball player and you're working on your shot, your way of tracking it can be simply how comfortable and spontaneous the shooting motion becomes for you, where it becomes something that is automatic as, holding a fork when you eat, for example.
That's, this is the thing, and I'm glad you said it that way, because sometimes people listen to advice or things that someone says in their background is business, and you think, oh, this is only going to apply to business. It works for anything. And you're right. Mm-hmm. If you just apply it. And so people who are listening to this, everything Yann has said actually today is applicable to any dream you have.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's safe to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what your dream is, how big or small it is. It doesn't matter where you are right now in your professional life. You can even be a student. It doesn't really matter. This approach, all the things we've talked about until now apply to you really, regardless of who you are, what your dream is, what is it that you want to achieve.
There you go. Now, Yann, before we let you go, one thing I ask is, what is one thing you would recommend to someone who's chasing their dreams? And this year, for 2017, I'm kind of going with, what is one action today you would tell them to do?
That's a good one. Well, I think that to stay in line with what we've talked about here, I would say that my advice, and this is something that is kind of counterintuitive, because it is a thing that is relatively easy to do. You don't have to spend any money to do this. You don't have to have any particular programming skill to do this or whatever, any particular talent. So it's simple to execute, but then it's also difficult, which is a change of mindset. So I would really want you to start to not be afraid to try things out, not to be afraid to experiment, not to be afraid to jump, to test. We talked about the 3 T's. So don't be afraid. If there is one piece of advice I can give you is, nowadays there are so many different ways we can learn new things and this and that. But at the end of the day, it all starts with you. It all starts with you taking action. So don't be afraid to really jump and take the risks, because I truly believe that great things really happen when you step outside of your comfort zone.
Well, I can't end the episode any better than that. Yann, thank you so much for taking your afternoon and speaking with us and sharing, and kicking off the new year. I couldn't kick it off better myself, for sharing your insights, and hopefully you guys will take that to heart. So thank you again for sharing that.
It's my pleasure. And thank you, everybody. And I know, Amy, you're going to have the links in the show notes. So I want to just give a little bit of accountability. If you have any questions, any doubts, you have some goals you have set up for this year, whatever, just reach out to me. I'm always happy to hear from people and to help people whenever I can.
And guys, that was Yann Ilunga, who was awesome. There was knowledge nuggets being dropped left and right, nonstop throughout the episode. Things that, the advice is applicable to everything, not just podcasting. What else did he say? His one piece of advice: change your mindset, right? My favorite was stop comparing your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. Okay. Put those blinders on. All right. And so for more of the nuggets and more of the links that Yann mentioned in his show, in the show, you can find them over at chasingdreamshq.com/episode 74. That's episode 74. And one other thing that is mentioned on the show notes is the link to his Podcast Success Academy. So if you guys are thinking of doing a podcast this year or dabbling in that area, definitely check that out. Okay. So until next time, put on those blinders and focus on your own dream chase. All right. So that you can keep chasing.
Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Dreams. Amy would love to connect with you and hear all about your pursuit of chasing your dreams. Connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram via @ChasingDreamsHQ. Or you can find Amy on Twitter @AmyJ21. That's AIMEEJ21. Be sure to visit headquarters over at ChasingDreamsHQ.com for more inspiration, motivation, and resources to help with your own dream chase. We hope you'll join Amy next week, and until then, keep chasing.